Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Safari Talks. We're very excited this evening to be joined by two gentlemen, Jeremy Boggs and our friend Nick Dyer. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Jeremy grew up in Zimbabwe and Malawi and formed a very deep love for the bush. Actually, we were talking a little bit earlier on that we possibly met at Savuti in Botswana many, many moons ago. But after studying 15 years economics and working in wine as a chef, restaurateur, his winemaking studies were interrupted as he accidentally worked in the safari industry, and that's when we would have met. And this was in Botswana, where you met your lovely wife, who was somewhere around in the background. But you guys got married under an acacia tree in Savuti, and since then you vowed to support conservation in your walks of life in the future, and you've done an extremely good job of that. But after returning to your wine career and building an experience in South Africa, you founded Painted Wolf Wines, and that was about 13 years ago. So your mission, from what I understand, was to produce characterful wines and sustainably as well, and to fund conservation as you've done, and more specifically your passion for the African wild dog, which we know as the Painted Wolf. And to date, you've raised over 2 million rands worth of conservation money that's gone towards different efforts to conserve the highly endangered Painted Wolf. I'll let you talk a little bit more about yourself shortly, but I also want to bring in Nick Dyer, who I met about a year ago in Manapuf. And we actually, before that, started to carve out to try and see what sort of experiences, using his skill set, he could offer some of our guests traveling around Zimbabwe. But Nick is an award-winning wildlife photographer. He's a conservationist and a photographic guide. And he really has a deep passion for the Painted Wolf that he's been following around up in Manapur specifically since 2013. And hence started 3 years ago the Painted Wolf Foundation, which is really to raise funds and awareness towards the endangered species in the wild dog. We have partnered as African Bush Camps with Nick to really bring a unique experience to our guests who are very interested in photographic experiences, who are very interested in the Painted Wolf. And we did a few safaris last year with Nick, and you were able to really add value to our guest experience. So thank you for doing that, and welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks. We're so delighted to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we want to just thank our audience for joining us this evening on this fourth episode. And to our audience, please feel free to post any questions, and hopefully we can all get your questions. And if we don't get your questions tonight, we'll be sure to contact you and hopefully get back to you and answer some of those questions. But before we go into the conversation with both Nick and Jeremy, we just want to acknowledge and thank Under the Influence, who've provided us before the lockdown these delicious wines that we're having during the course of these talks and these episodes. Under the Influence is a company based out of South Africa that provide all our beverages. Specifically, they do a lot of our wines for all our safari camps in Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. But they also provide training for all our teams who want to learn a little bit more about wine so that they can also educate our guests and improve the wine experiences. So thank you very much to Under the Influence. And tonight, I'll let Jeremy maybe talk a little bit about the wine that has been kindly sponsored by his organization. Jeremy, why don't you tell us what we have here?
Okay, so well, I'm very delighted to say that we're a significant supplier of Under the Influence, and through Under the Influence, our wines get out to safari businesses throughout Africa. So we are a wine company that was set out to sustainably fund conservation and African wild dog conservation, or African painted wolf conservation to be specific. And the wine that we have this evening is a Pinotage. I'll just show it. Whoops, I don't know quite how this works. Oh, there we are. Pinotage, and it's a wine called Guillermo, and it's Pinotage grapes from the Swartland region. And Guillermo is one of the investors in my company. When we first started Painted Wolf Wines, we put together a a plan that's envisaged us being able to sell wine and donate money from the sale of each bottle that we made, and had difficulty actually getting cash from people, but people were prepared to give me stuff. And one of the people that gave me stuff was this man called Guillermo, and he lives actually very close to where Beks lives. He lives in Hout Bay and lovely down in the Cape Peninsula. He's an Argentinian guy. He loves organic viticulture, and he's really in touch with nature and the earth. And these grapes come from his vineyard. He actually gave me grapes, and I gave him shares for grapes. Nobody wants to give me cash, as I mentioned. So anyway, Guillermo Pinotage, organic grapes, beautiful, really finessed, a really finessed example of this actually somewhat rambunctious South African native grape variety. So cheers, folks. I hope some of you out there in the lockdown ether, wherever you are, have got glasses of wine that you can enjoy this evening. I'm looking forward to one or two little comments popping up over there with an affirmative on that. Yes, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you very much, and thank you for donating the case of wine, which I believe is called the Dog Box, to our audience this evening, to a lucky winner who I think will do a draw at some point, and they'll be able to enjoy the Dog Box. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so gentlemen, we'll go straight into our conversation. I mean, the two of you have known each other now for years, as I understand. Why don't you tell us, Jeremy, how did you guys come across each other? How did you meet? I mean, you have such a common understanding and a common passion between the two of you of this endangered species, the painted wolf. How did you guys meet? I
think we met through a very special mutual lady friend who is in Zimbabwe. It's a rather delightful lady. We had to share her attention for a little while. Now we met through our joint friendship with Lynn Barry. Right. And I shouldn't be saying this because we do something that's I wouldn't say slightly in competition, because it's at the very other end of Zimbabwe where most people don't go. But we run a wine and wild dog safari in Gonraju National Park, and it's run in conjunction with Lynn. And anyway, I don't know quite how Lynn met Nick, but Nick ended up coming on our safari a few years ago, which was incredibly, well, it was wonderful. It was so nice to have him there and to meet him. And Nick is a very incredible guy, very special man with a lot of depth. And I mean, he has got a very interesting and very high-powered past, and he's a man who brings a great deal to the whole space of the whole African wild dog, African painted wolf conservation space. So yeah, we were very, very blessed to have met him and had him on our safari. And actually, I should do a safari with you too, Beks. That would be fun, wouldn't it? In fact, the three of us can do one together. But anyway, that's another.
Put that in your diary, and I'm sure the three of us could meet up in monopools and spot a painted wolf or two. But because we keep referencing to this painted wolf, we can't assume that everybody knows exactly what it is. And I think the best person to probably just give us a quick facts about this, Nick. Do you want to go ahead and just tell us why the fuss about this animal and why is it endangered?
Yeah, absolutely, Beks. One of the first things that many people won't know what a painted wolf is. A lot of people will know them as wild dogs, Cape hunting dogs, even African hunting dogs. But the reality is that even those people who know them by those names don't know them, are very small, because they're a very unknown species compared to lions, elephants, and so on and so forth. But basically, they are, first of all, not dogs. Yeah, they are a completely different genus. They are part of Canidae, which are the broader wild dog, the broader dog genus. But they are they are in family, but they are a separate genus. So in the dog family, you've got our domestic dogs, wolves. We've got coyotes, dholes, all those guys, even jackals. But then in a separate genus is Lycaon, and the only guy in there is Lycaon pictus. So they're not really related, or they are related, but they're not related to a point where they could have offspring, mate together, or anything like that. But they live in packs, and those packs are run by an alpha female. Pack sizes go from anything from just 2 dogs right up to 40. They are also Africa's most efficient hunter. Some say that about 80% of their hunts result in kills, which is way superior to any lion or any other cat. They are also extremely endangered. 100 years ago, there were probably 500,000 painted wolves, wild dogs in the world. Today, there are only 6,500 left. They have been severely persecuted as vermin by man, and they continue to suffer today from snaring, disease, and persecution by farmers, which has been their most recent history and caused their demise. So they're highly endangered. They're also highly difficult to find on safari, and a real treat when you do, because one of the most incredible things about them, and you know this and we all know this, is that they are so much fun. Whereas lions can just sleep all day and sort of like do absolutely nothing. The dogs, when they wake up, they play with each other, they chase each other, they bite, they scratch. They are just a lot of fun. They compete with submission and not with aggression, and they're run by a female. And so the alpha female rules the roost, keeps all the boys and girls in order.
That's not standard across.
Here's the alpha female of the Painted Wolf Wine Company here.
Cheers to everybody. Doing a great job, guys. Keep it up.
So there's a couple of cool things. So I believe that's originally there was sort of one proto-canid, and something like 2 million years ago there was a split between the proto-canids and the African painted wolves went off in their own little space, and then all the other species of canids are actually from the other guy. And I think somehow these doggies split up, and some of them ended up in the northern hemisphere and became, all the various different species, and then migrated back to Africa, and the African painted wolves stayed here. And the wine that I'm drinking, this evening, comes from a vineyard where the soil was laid down at about the same time that this event was happening in evolution. So that's always something that I think is kind of fun, that it's our youngest soil here. It's a shale type soil, and it was deposited sort of during an ice age type of a scenario. It's out in the Swartland, which is also this area that has incredibly rich plant biodiversity traditionally. It's been largely plowed over and planted with wheat fields, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's always kind of a fun thing. So somewhere in this glass is something that is related to the split in the canid evolutionary tree.
That's incredible. That detail I did not know. But Nick, we want to we want to come back to you shortly, Nick, because this incredible research that you've been doing since 2013. I mean, you've been following the painted wolves since 2013, and you've seen some incredible things and captured incredible things online. And your coffee table book speaks so much volumes for the images that you've captured. So we'll come back to you because we would like to learn a little bit about the research that you do. There you go.
This is the best book that's ever been published, certainly on this species, and one of the very best wildlife books ever published.
Thanks, Jeremy.
And Jeremy, what I'm very interested in, I mean, you're a guy in the Cape. you make wine. And what is your affinity specifically to Painted Wolves? I mean, your affinity is such that you named your business Painted.
Okay, so it was a serendipitous accident.
Right.
When all those years back, when Emma and I worked in Savuti, we actually ended up getting married under this big acacia tree that was close to Pampan. And on our wedding day, we said to one another that we'd like to try and do something to put some resource and some energy back into the space. And many, many years passed, and eventually the time came for us to start. We started making a little bit of wine, and Emma and I sort of re-engaged with this thought, and we decided that we would try and actually give people nice wine and fleece some cash from them so we could support conservation. But we didn't know what it was going to be. And we had lots of different thoughts. And my initial thoughts were the more sort of normal, the big charismatic rhinoceros, whatever and ever. And all those spaces were filled. And eventually I was getting a bit frustrated. And an Africa Geographic magazine that carried an article about the reintroduction of dogs into KZN, and the article, it was actually captioned in the Natal Painted Wolf Project. And I looked at it, I did a trademark search, and I found it was registrable, which was very important. And then Emma and I started to discuss our experiences that we'd had in Botswana with dogs, and just started to realize that this is just a really incredible creature. And a lot of it started to make sense for me. I lived in California for 9 years, and I worked for guys that you could term as hippie entrepreneurs, people that were very bright, but very engaged with local community and wanted to use their intellect and their resources to actually benefit the broader world. And I just realized that how Painted Wolves organize themselves socially actually gave me a template to create a business proposition of this type of this nature. And we set out right from the very beginning to try and figure out how to utilize the business to sustainably provide money for conservation. And I mean, we mostly work with conservation charities that are in the Painted Wolf sphere, but we do some other things as well. I'm a very strong believer that you can't do conservation if you don't help people as well. So we've partnered with Children in the Wilderness, and we help them with some stuff as well. And then we do some other ad hoc stuff, pangolin stuff. We like all the weird things that nobody else loves very much. That's our thing. So we like the vultures and the pangolins, and those types of creatures. I expect if there was a hyena fund, we'd probably want to get involved with that as well. But so that's basically it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a great connection. So why don't you just maybe tell us a little bit about how people can support your initiatives? Because quite clearly, you have worked with quite a few organizations that are really spearheading and are in the front line of conservation, particularly for the dogs. Could you tell us how, if there's people listening in our audience right now,
yes,
they would probably want to know how they can best support organizations?
On the most fundamental level, obviously, I mean, people can just buy a bottle of Painted Wolf wine, and a portion of the sale of that bottle will go to one or other charity, and it depends on where they. For instance, if they're living in UK, if they buy a bottle of Painted Wolf wines, a donation is made to Tusk, and then Tusk, for a very small management fee, split my donation 3 ways. Some goes to PDC and Hwangi, some goes to the Lowveld Wild Dog Project, and then a third portion goes to Botswana Predator Conservation Trust. And domestically in South Africa, it's the Endangered Wildlife Trust and their projects that they run throughout the whole of South Africa. And then the other stuff that they do, like helping take dogs to Gorongosa, and so this, I mean, that's the most obvious way. But I mean, I would highly recommend, if anybody wants to support a conservation charity in the painted wolf sphere, to actually support the charity that Nick started because Nick's well, he can tell you a lot more about his vision, but his vision is a much more of an umbrella type of vision where please tell me your story, Nick. I'm not going to tell your story for you.
So what's important? We might as well bring you into the feed, Nick, to tell us a little bit about your research as well, because this partnership, strategic partnership that we formed over a year ago in inviting people to come out on safari and join you on these amazing trips. We give. I worked out that over the last 3 years, African bush camps, we give 2.5% of our total turnover to our foundation, so that we can carry out various projects in alleviating poverty, and also just bringing a sense of awareness and a sense of sustainability in rural communities, particularly along the places where our camps operate. And a portion of those funds also go heavily into conservation. But the whole reason for bringing these communities on board for us is because they really are the true custodians of the wildlife in the wilderness areas, and they need to be benefiting as well as having a lead role in conserving some of these areas. And obviously, through partnership with you, people that come on our safaris, they know that by coming on safari with us, it allows us to be able to support conservation efforts and also support our local communities, and particularly the safaris around that you guide. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about your research, but also about the vision that you have for the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I couldn't agree with you more about communities being the core of conservation. I mean, that is an incredibly powerful message. And it's very worrying times now with the drop in tourism, that the support that these communities have been getting is at risk. But effectively, I gave up my role. I was a fund manager in the UK. I ran a marketing company. I was an entrepreneur, and then I gave that all up in about 2011. And
you had a pretty high-powered job, from what I recall, in the streets of London, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, it was fun, but I was never fulfilled, and I think that was the real important thing. I never had this great feeling of personal satisfaction. Trading shares on Wall Street, gave you so much, but no, I mean, it was a thrill, but I never felt I was doing anything particularly worthwhile. And then I came out here. I just didn't want to do that anymore. I grew up in Kenya, so wanted to go back to Kenya, which is where I came from. And then I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was going to be a scuba diver instructor for a while. Then I came to South Africa, and I suddenly realized my real passion was photography. So I spent probably about 2-3 years just driving all over southern and eastern Africa, getting to know the parks, getting to know conservationists, but above all, getting to know the communities and trying to understand about this human-wildlife conflict, because I do believe that is the biggest threat to wildlife going forward. So anyway, but I thought I love photography. So I wasn't, I was getting better. I'd started when I was 8, but I'd never given it my whole attention. And initially, all I really wanted to do was I want to be famous. I want to win awards. I want to be recognized, and so on and so forth. And then one day in Manapools, I was shooting the dogs, the Nyakasanga pack, and they had just made a kill, and it was beautiful light. I had them all to myself. I was 2 kilometers away from my car, having walked in, and it was just beautiful. And I walked back, and I suddenly realized it was a Monday morning, and normally I would have been on the tube in London, right? So I suddenly thought, I am so privileged, and I had to do something different. Around about the same time, I met Peter Blinston, of Painted Dog Conservation, a brilliant conservationist. And we met up. It's a long, funny story in Manipools. But we suddenly thought we've always wanted to write a book. He liked my pictures. I love what he did. And so we decided to write that book, that big, heavy thing that Jeremy just lifted up.
Cheers, let's have a look again. There we are.
And the thing is that it was a long journey to produce, but what we decided at the very beginning is that we get a lot of pleasure from the dogs, and the dogs need support, and all the profits that we make from that book, we won't make anything. It will all go into the to the dogs. We didn't know how, but we suddenly realized I was filming. Remember the BBC were in Manapools filming Dynasties? And Nick Lyon, the producer, said, I'm going to actually make, we're going to call them Painted Wolves. So I went, when I got back to dry land, or basically to Harare, I Googled Painted Wolves, and all I found was this bloody wine company. So
this cheeky wine company, slightly ahead of the curve.
But potentially 1 billion people were going to see this, hear this film, amazing film, on Painted Wolves, narrated by David Attenborough. But, they'll Google it, and Jeremy's sales would go through the roof. But we decided that actually we'll change the name of we'll call them Painted Wolves. People like Richard Branson were very keen to rebrand them. But also we would set up the Painted Wolf Foundation, so that when people Google it, they will actually find a proper conservation organization that directly deals with the wolves. And we set up 2 objectives, right? Obviously to raise funds, but our objectives were to, first of all, raise awareness. Nobody knows who these animals are. And what we wanted to do was to, at least, with only 6,500 left in the world, to put them on the top table of conservation, along with the rhino, along with the elephant. There's far less wild dogs. It's not that they're more or less important. They are at huge risk. In the race to extinction, they're winning it. And they don't want to be in that race. And, so what can we do to help them? The second thing, the other objective that we wanted was, okay, fine. So we started this awareness campaign, which has been running very successfully for the last 2 years. The other thing that we decided that, across Africa, you have all these small, but very good wild dog conservation organizations. Yeah. And there's not huge communication between them. They work, very disparately. So what we saw as a vision, to become a conduit to bring them together. And this is a lot of work that we've been doing. In fact, while this lockdown, it's not great, but we've managed to contact 90% and have serious conversations about bringing everyone together. The enthusiasm, this is from East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, here in Zambia, everywhere. We've been speaking to them all. Diane Skinner, who's running this, has brought them together. She's one of the leading conservationists, and we want to find a way, especially now where money is going to be hard for conservation, to actually find, are there economies of scale? Are there ways we can save money? We don't want to lead everything and tell them what to do. These are really high quality people and high quality organizations. It's a case of, what can the Painted Wolf Foundation do to be useful and do a conduit, help raise funds, and bolster and create a kind of dog recovery fund, perhaps in the same way. We're working with Tusk, we're working with WCN in America, to try and see how we can create something of real lasting value for the dog conservation.
So you touched on something that's very important with regards to being a conduit to bringing people together. Quite often, and I'm sure that's the result of your observation, that in the conservation space, quite often people are off doing different things on their own, holding on to valuable information that could be useful for the greater good. I mean, we all have a common purpose at the end of the day, to conserve the species of this planet. So it's great that you have that vision to do that. And one of the initiatives that your colleague Peter Blinston has been involved with, we started a collaboration effort called Conservation and Wildlife Fund, which really was a coming together of safari operators, researchers, scientists, to say, we all have a common cause. The landscape is the same landscape that we're all fighting to conserve. And as a result of that, we have built up this fund and are tackling stuff that is more the bigger kind of stuff, and looking at the whole landscape as opposed to looking at each individual silos. And I think that the next big swing that will really bring conservation to success is the power of being able to do this together, as opposed to individual organization. Look, we all have different foundations. African Bush Camps has its own foundation, and we're all doing amazing work individually. But the reality is we're still losing X number of rhino a day, X number of elephants. We're still losing so many keystone species on a daily basis. So really something fundamentally needs to take a shift. Again, in terms of collaboration, we are at a point now, and you'd be pleased to know this, Nick. We obviously are at a point right now where this dire situation, where tourism is basically there's zero tourism in any of the Southern African countries, and as a result of this, there's less eyes out there. There's less resources to send rangers out, to employ rangers, particularly with government organizations such as national parks, because there is no revenue for the park either. So one of the things that we set out to do is to collaborate with national parks. They have a deficit of 35 rangers in monopools. Monopools is one of the richest places for the painted wolf, as you know, and it's been very successful actually at conserving the species through its efforts. And it's not only the wild dogs that are in danger there, but also bushmeat, ivory poaching, and various other species. So we're very excited to be able to start adding on rangers. We're going to start with 8 rangers to begin with, an anti-poaching base in the eastern part of monopools, and hopefully we'll ramp that up to meet that deficit of the 35 rangers that are needed. And with that, we'll also require some kind of sustenance and support to supplement some of the protein for rangers. So these programs are really crucial. Hence the safaris that we put together, where certain proceeds are considered for those efforts. One of the questions that the audience is asking out there is what are we doing specifically for conservation of wild dogs and anti-poaching at this time? So I just thought I'd just give that insight in terms of what are the risks, particularly at this time. It's not just monopools, but it's all the parks basically throughout Southern Africa, where there's already been a report of increased illegal activity as a result of fewer eyes actually observing out there. So that's something that particularly for our audience, we want to really partner with them and encourage people to rally behind tourism companies, because at the end of the day, COVID-19 or not, you've got these incredible wild places and these vulnerable species that need looking after.
Yes.
I think I'll just add on a small thing there. I mean, for me personally, when I was thinking, okay, getting a bit of notoriety, who can I take, who can I, bring guests to, and who can I operate with? What was really important to me was finding an organization that took conservation very seriously and actually supported it. And I think from anyone who's listening, who's thinking of going on a holiday, on a safari in the future, is to really think of choosing organizations that do support conservation, because you will be surprised how many organizations out there that will take your money and make nice profits, but do very little for the communities that they exist in. And so it was very important to me when met Beks and learnt about your foundation, just how important that was. And I think the other thing is that a lot of conservation is based on, just putting your hand out and asking for donors to come up here. And I think the three of us actually share a sort of entrepreneurial background that means that actually conservation can make money. You can use your business skills to actually raise money, make money. And whether I've done it with Peter through a book, you're doing it with your wine, with the African Bush Camps. I mean, these are really going to be increasingly important as tourist numbers are much lower.
Yeah,
that's great.
Indeed, I think
all these are sustainable models that we go by. Obviously, we're in business, a commercial venture to make profit, and we're unashamed about that. But fundamentally, like we all do, is that we also believe that businesses are a good force for change. And really the work that you do, Nick, through your research and bringing this awareness, the vision that you have, and your involvement, Jeremy. All of this business is what allows us to be able to really
Yes.
Live our passion and make a significant contribution to wildlife, and not just wildlife, the people that surround it.
Yeah, I just want to come in here a little. I mean, people are actually staggered that we give about 5% of our annual turnover to a raft of different conservation charities, and this was we did that when we were making a loss. We did it before we actually made a profit. It probably did definitely push our sort of break-even point out a few years. But make a conscious decision that this is how you're going to run your business, and you structure your business with this in mind. You write this into your budget. It's structured. It's part of the DNA of your business. It's not an arduous or difficult thing. It's actually just, I mean, purely from a business perspective, it becomes just a business expense. It becomes like a salary expense or another business expense. But it's a very, very important business expense, because it allows other people to do this really crucial work with conservation. And I mean, I look at so many of my colleagues and in the business that I'm in the wine business, and people spend an enormous amount of money on all kinds of fancy things, dining in the fanciest restaurants, which is, that's fine. And you obviously want restaurants to stock your wines, but it's the benefit of doing that is nothing like the benefit that we derive from actually taking that money that could be spent on these peripheral things and putting that money into Tusk and putting it into the Endangered Wildlife Trust. And yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly satisfying business model. And I would encourage any entrepreneur out there, any business person, to relook at the way they do things and to actually find the space within their business to create a pool of funds to be able to fund something as important as the conservation of African painted wolves.
I think just talking from having run a company, having worked on, in the city and in Wall Street and so forth, is that now that I'm doing something more altruistic and it's built into my model, I've never felt more personally satisfied, and with a strong belief in what I'm doing is actually making a difference. It may not be great. It may not be, I'm not going to save every animal or every wild dog on, in thing, but I feel I'm doing it right. That this is a big difference to just how I feel inside.
Indeed.
Trying to help something. I'm sure we all feel that.
But strong houses are made with small bricks, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you to you both. So there's a question that everybody wants to know is, where can they find that big, heavy book? How can they access it?
I'm very honestly, they are.
Monopools yet, because it's so heavy. Is my copy still in monopools, or?
No, it's here, right? Because I haven't seen you in Zim since, and I've signed it and written it. Peter and I have both signed your copy, right? But it's actually on my bookshelf, waiting for you to actually that we meet up again. And when I last went into Mana, I wasn't allowed to take it on the plane because it was too heavy. So yeah, you got to treat looking forward to you. But basically.
Right. Where can we? I mean, is it what bookshops is it available in?
I mean, it's available on Amazon, and it's available if you go onto the Painted Wolf Foundation's website, which is paintedwolf.org. You will be able to go to the book page. on that site, you can learn huge amounts about these incredible animals and the organizations that conserve them. Go to the book, and then there's two options. One, to buy them in South Africa, because importing them in South Africa is always quite difficult, and then rest of the world. So, and they're sent out from London. So yeah, please take a look. And they're also, as I say, also on Amazon. They're in exclusive books under lockdown. But I've just heard South Africa yesterday was able to send them out again.
Right. And that's very useful. Thanks, Nick. And Jeremy, during this time of lockdown, what can people do to support your wines with the view of supporting initiatives?
What we did is that, I mean, 6 or 8 weeks ago, we realized that things were really shutting down for us, particularly in Africa, and so we started a very sharp and quite aggressive discounting policy, and we've been doing an offer for the last couple of months where we've been giving people 25% off the cost of our wines. But the really good thing about that is that because we're selling directly to the public, we're still making a little bit more revenue than we would be selling through trade channels. And we've decided actually to increase the donation that we're making to the Endangered Wildlife Trust, because the other business that we have in South Africa, guys are not paying us. So that's kind of dried up. So we've had a really successful campaign. A lot of people have actually bought wine from us that's due to be delivered as soon as we're able to do so. If anybody's
very much like us, what you're saying essentially is order wine, buy wine, we'll deliver later, and it's the same message that we're saying actually for Safari: book now and travel later.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, we all still need to keep going so that our collaborative efforts and investments over so many years into conserving some of these wild places, that we're able to have these beautiful places and these wildlife species later on. So we're very happy to continue to promote that, particularly for both of you, because of the contributions that you guys make. It's really.
Actually also say that this is really, really good wine. I love wine, and this is among South Africa's best. And
thank you, Nick.
No, honestly, I'm not just saying it. It's delicious.
I mean, am I allowed to just blow my trumpet a little bit? We were the top-rated wine at one of the most important domestic competitions last year, which is the Old Mutual Trophy Wine Show, and Painted Wolf, which is really a relatively small organization, got the top trophy, and something that in past years has been awarded to very famous and well-known wineries. But anyway, the other thing is I do have a few copies of Nick's book to sell in my tasting room. It's the only thing we can legally sell at the moment is books and T-shirts. So if anybody can, if you want a copy desperately, you can send me an email too quickly, and I can sell you a copy of Nick's book.
Thank you for that, Jeremy, and congratulations on that award. By the way, that's quite an achievement there.
Thank you.
We must now wrap up, and we've come to the end of the fourth episode of the Safari Talks. Thank you very much to you both for not only joining us this evening to have this conversation and highlight the plight of the Painted Wolf, but also just for showing up with your passion for conservation and the work that you do. So thank you very much to you both, and thank you to our audience. Just a reminder that we will be giving away that dog box to one of our lucky members of the audience this evening. Thank you very much for joining that again. and look forward to seeing you guys out on safari. Jeremy, I hope you can join Nick and I in Mana Pools at some point.
I'm there already, and in spirit, I'm there.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to our audience for your time this evening and following us. And we look forward to sharing the same place with you next week.
Thank you so much for inviting us to come. It's been so much fun. Thank you.
A lot of fun. Thank you very much, Beks. Thank you.
And to